course, we've provided shelter assistance also during the ceasefire, so some of it may be left over from that. And shockingly, a lot of people actually go back to the areas where most of the areas have been destroyed, and they choose to live next to or on top of the rubble of their home. The sheer kind of level of desperation and destruction that Gaza has undergone, and me going for the first time to Gaza City back in the beginning of the conflict, and not recognizing the house where I used to live back in when I used to work here before, and not recognizing anything around it, and unlivable. Um, I mean, honestly, we've used so many adjectives over the last months to describe it that I think at this point we've run out of adjectives that would actually accurately depict the situation here.
With me, Olga Cherevko, spokesperson, United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, directly from Gaza. Olga, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Milka.
After the Israeli attacks on its compound, killing 1, injuring 5, the UN announced reducing its staff in Gaza, and the needs are increasing. What does this mean?
Yeah, you're correct. So we've actually had to make a very difficult decision over the course of these events that took place, that also included the killing of one of our colleagues, and actually several of our colleagues. There were also national staff killed during that day. And of course, the closure of the crossings that we've had for more than 3 weeks now, which is the longest period we've had since October 2023, and our very constrained ability to deliver assistance. So we've made the decision to temporarily reduce our footprint, but to reiterate that we are not leaving Gaza. We have stayed and delivered since the beginning of this war and before, of course, and we do not plan on stopping doing so. So in the meantime, we're of course delivering what we can with the resources that we have. And
so what are you able to deliver actually?
We have had to suspend some of our operations, of course, because both of the security situation and the environment, and as well as due to various evacuation orders that have been issued, and of course because we're running out of supplies. But we are basically trying to stretch the stock that we have for as long as possible. So some of the things that we've had to do, for example, in food assistance, we had to, in the beginning, to reduce when the crossings closed. We had to reduce some of the food rations so that we would be able to reach more people and prioritize the most vulnerable first to ensure that we reach them, and then that way they stretch a bit longer. But of course, this is not going to last forever, and the only solution to this issue is to reopen the entry of cargo, which includes humanitarian aid.
And what is, at the moment, what is mostly needed in Gaza?
It's hard to really say what is the highest need because the entire population is dependent on humanitarian assistance. And during the ceasefire, we were able to deliver a lot of this assistance and try to mitigate some of the human impact of the 15 months of hostilities that people endured. And this, of course, has been undone by the renewed escalation of hostilities and the attacks and the more displacement and the closure of these crossings. So unfortunately, this progress is no longer viable for us. And
And do you see this massive displacement at the moment under the recent bombardments?
Absolutely. So, in less than a week, we're estimating more than 124,000 people that have so far been displaced as a result of these orders and the hostilities, which is, of course, huge for the size of the population of Gaza. And this is, of course, people who have already been displaced a dozen or more times over the course of the 15 months of fighting.
And Gaza is now tons of ruins, and even tents were stopped at the border. So where people seek shelter, where they sleep, like practically, asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you go, there's obviously some organized sites. There's also informal sites where people have, whatever kind of shelter that they built for themselves. Some of it may be old sheets. Some of it, of course, we've provided shelter assistance also during the ceasefire. So some of it may be left over from that. And shockingly, a lot of people actually go back to the areas where most of the areas have been destroyed, and they choose to live next to or on top of the rubble of their home. And of course, it's very dangerous. And we've had a number of reports that homes have collapsed since people have returned. And of course, this is very, very dangerous for people. And that also includes the risk of unexploded ordnance that is still present in some of these areas.
And how this recent intense bombardments also on hospitals have affected already a critical situation in the medical sector?
The medical sector, as well as most other sectors, have been decimated. The healthcare is basically on its knees. We've managed to improve the situation a bit again during the ceasefire by expanding the number of health points, providing some critical equipment and supplies. But again, all of this is being undone because of the hostilities and because of the closure of the crossings, and because of the huge number of casualties that are being received in the hospitals. They are running out of very critical supplies, including blood banks, of course. And many hospitals are reporting almost 100% capacity. And of course, they are short on many critical equipment and supplies and medication.
And what is the mental state of the people? It has been going on for 17 months. We are hearing mothers saying, I cannot feed my children, I cannot protect my children. How do people, cope with that?
Yes, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you speak to people, on one hand, they're extremely resilient. And I think that's something that has always been remarkable about the people here, that they have lived through multiple wars and escalations and come out very resilient and still able to smile and still able to welcome you in whatever type of home that they have and tell you their story and have hope for a future. But I would say increasingly that hope is maybe being replaced by despair, which is of course extremely worrying and tragic. And I have spoken to people who have told me, we are living here, but really this is not a life. We're dead. We've been dead for quite some time. We're just existing, really, in this environment. And when I go around various places with colleagues, who some of them have only seen the level of destruction just recently, because a lot of people obviously haven't been able to make it from across the Netzarim corridor. to Gaza City or the North Governorate. And every time we drive through these areas, the shock on their faces is just so visible, and they cannot fathom how the place where they grew up and their homes and everything that they know is now just a pile of rubble.
Are there any situations or scenes you've witnessed and are haunting you, and are still in you? You cannot forget what you've seen, what you've heard from people.
I mean, there's so many of these scenes. It's hard to pick just one. I mean, there's just the sheer kind of level of desperation and destruction that Gaza has undergone, and me going for the first time to Gaza City back in the beginning of the conflict, and not recognizing the house where I used to live back in when I used to work here before, and not recognizing anything around it, and when we were really in dire straits over the food security situation, and there was a real threat of famine here when we were speaking about it back in October, that we were able to actually avert with the ceasefire. But I remember one of the scenes, we were walking through a neighborhood, and there was a big kind of pile of like a dumping site, and there was a little boy, probably around 4 years old, and there was a big pile of oranges that have been, I guess, discarded by a vendor or whatever it was. And he was walking around this pile and trying to pick out any that are still whole, the fruit, from this pile. And of course, they're all rotten because they're already thrown away. But he was putting them in his shirt like this, and I guess trying to take it to his family. And then I've seen other things like people, when we were having massive shortages of flour, sometimes sacks of flour would fall on the road from the trucks that would deliver the flour. And I've seen people would go in the middle of the road and just scoop up the flour that had spilled on the road into a bucket to just have something. So there are a lot of these stories, and unfortunately, they're, I think, not being heard.
And I'll quote sentence UN humanitarian chief said a few days ago. He said, "We are in Gaza to save lives, not to lose." But looking at the situation, you simply can't. It seems like the international organizations are helpless in the face of, Israeli decisions, for example, to block aid, medical evacuations, or attacks on hospitals, humanitarian workers. And we are just, have been watching for months the relentless violence and suffering of people in Gaza.
We very often do feel quite helpless, but of course, we haven't given up, and we don't plan to give up. This is unfortunately one of these tragic statistics that keep popping up everywhere, but not being really paid attention to for whatever reasons. And of course, we've said multiple times, and we've called out these repeated attacks on our facilities, on our staff, on, of course, the hospitals and other critical humanitarian infrastructure, and our shelters. And of course, the last year was the deadliest on record for humanitarian workers, period.
Also for
And
journalists.
yeah, exactly. For journalists, and I mean, the impact on people is just astonishing. And of course, the besides the physical trauma and the physical injuries that they will carry with them, some of them for the rest of their lives, it will also be the mental trauma and the psychological trauma and the effects that are being seen on children and all the others that have endured this conflict.
And maybe a last question because you know Gaza very well. You've been working there many times. How would you describe Gaza now?
Unlivable. I mean, honestly, we've used so many adjectives over the last months to describe it that I think at this point we've run out of adjectives that would actually accurately depict the situation here.
Okay, Olga, thank you so much for updating us on the current humanitarian situation in Gaza. Olga Cherevko, spokesperson, United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Thank you so much for your time and stay safe.
Thank you, Milka.